So Russell Brand has finally been charged with multiple crimes, and this sort of came to light in a Times and Sunday Times investigation back, I think, in September 2023. Now, what Russell Brand is now saying is it's basically like a stitch up, and we kind of all knew this was going to happen when he fully embraced conservatism and became a born again Christian baptized by Bear Grylls in the River Thames. And as we've seen multiple times with lots of people over the years, they flee to religion and conservatism because they know that when the inevitable happens and when their crimes come to light or when they're actually formally charged with their crimes and you can't ignore it anymore, that they will have people to fall back on and people who will forgive them for a variety of reasons. And sadly, that is some of the most toxic parts of Christianity. If you repent and say, well, you did all that before you were a Christian, but now you see the light of God and you're a Christian, there's a lot of Christian groups that will just forgive everything you ever did. And you actually see that in some of the comments responding to him saying you were like essentially like a different person. Like you're not even responsible for your past alleged crimes and all these things that have been uncovered because that was the pre-Christian version of you. So this isn't going to be like a massively in-depth video, but I do want to talk about this today because it seems like the final completion of Russell Brand's grift to the right. I mean, he's been a conservative for a long time these days, but I don't think this was always part of the plan. And I think a lot of people often say stuff like this when they don't really, I guess, when they haven't really looked into something properly. So it seems like the most obvious thing, right? The only reason he started becoming more conservative is because he wanted to protect himself from these sorts of allegations and now formal charges from the police in the UK. But it goes a bit deeper. I think you could call it like the Jimmy Dore left. It's people who used to be leftists who had their brains like rotted by like variety of different things. COVID seems to be the big one, but people who then became conservative afterwards. What I think of Russell Brand is that happened to him anyway, and then he just doubled down and he firmly made himself a conservative Christian to then protect himself even further. And I've said in previous videos, going back to like the start of 2022, I used to call him an ego grifter rather than an actual grifter, but it's pretty clear what he is now. So all of that coming up for you today. Please check me out on social media at the Kavernacle on Blue Sky and on Instagram. And if you want to support my work, check out my Patreon page and support me on YouTube memberships. So for those of you who don't know like about Russell Brand's trajectory, let's just give you like a short summary, I guess. So Russell Brand was always like super inflammatory growing up. I remember him being like really controversial. He had his own radio show where he used to platform like loads of conspiracy theorists, but he also used to be like a pretty vocal left-wing public figure, especially in regards to things like the monarchy and including things like Israel. Like he's one of the few British celebrities I remember speaking up for Gaza in 2014, and he's actually had a YouTube channel since then as well. And if you want to, you know, see me go through all this content, even in light of what's happened, I've made multiple videos about this. And then basically, from like, I don't even know what day it would be, it's past 2020, he started pivoting more to the conservative direction, like platforming more people less aggressively. And when it came to issues where he used to be like a firebrand on, including the monarchy and Israel, he started both siding everything, right? So previously, he'd said loads of criticism of the Israeli government. In October 2023, he both sides it. When the Queen died, he acted like he was actually upset about that, despite him saying loads of terrible stuff about the royal family, a lot of it well-earned over the years. And it was just pretty clear from that point what he was doing. He was going into the direction of what could get him the biggest appeal. But at this point, I don't actually think he was a conservative. I think he was one of those Jimmy Dore leftists who had their brains broken by COVID and then started allying more with like the libertarian right to rail against things like vaccines and to push more like, I don't know, pseudoscience. But then obviously what happened is he probably caught wind that there was a significant investigation into him done by two massive newspapers, obviously both owned by Murdoch now, the Times and the Sunday Times. And before these even came out, he made a video like really panicked, trying to basically get in there first to try and discredit what was reported.
I'm aware that you guys have been saying in the comments for a while, watch out, Russell, they're coming for you, you're getting too close to the truth. Russell Brand did not kill himself. I know that a year ago there was a spate of articles. Russell Brand's a conspiracy theorist. Russell Brand's right wing. I'm aware of news media making phone calls, sending letters to people I know for ages and ages. It's been clear to me, or at least it feels to me, like there's a serious and concerted agenda to control these kind of spaces and these kind of voices. And I mean my voice along with your voice.
So the Sunday Times and Times in September 2023 released this extremely thorough investigation into all these allegations into Russell Brand, including assault allegations against 16-year-old girls and stuff, who he would actually pick up from school and they'd be his girlfriend. And it's super disgusting. I actually have covered this in way more detail in these videos, so I'm not going to go over it again. And if you're not a leftist watching this, and you might even like Russell Brand still for some reason, please go read that, because what actually happened is immediately afterwards, all his new conservative friends started defending him.
Massive supposed expose from the Sunday Times in the UK accusing Russell Brand, a person I consider a friend, of sexual assault and abuse from the period 2006 to 2013. Now, I didn't know Russell Brand at that time. My guess is if I had known Russell Brand, I wouldn't have liked Russell Brand very much at that time, considering that Russell Brand, by his own admission, in all of his writings and in all of his statements, has basically admitted to being a sex addict and incredibly promiscuous and a person who I would be considered to have engaged in incredibly vile behavior during that entire period. And then Russell Brand has remade himself. And in the period where I've known Russell, which is really the past 3 or 4 years, Russell has been a person who is searching for something meaningful. He has settled down. Obviously, he's married. He has kids. He's a person who's been trying to put together a good life. Now, can I attest to Russell Brand's character from 2006 to 2013? Again, I cannot. I did not know him at that point. Do I think that Russell Brand today is a good person? Yes, I think that Russell Brand today is a good person. Alice, whose name we have changed to protect her identity, now realizes she wasn't fine. During a relationship that lasted for about 3 months when Brand was a BBC radio presenter, she says he referred to her as the child and alleges he became increasingly controlling and then emotionally and sexually abusive. So at this time, Brand was 30, and she was apparently 16. Okay, now, in the United States, crime. In the UK, not crime. The age of consent in the UK is 16, and apparently Brand ascertained that she was 16 by asking her and checking, which means scuzzy, scumbaggy behavior, sure. Criminal behavior, no. If you're, again, in the UK, and the age of consent changes from states, I would prefer the age of consent be 18. But if you're not going to have that, then that's what it is.
But I just think if you read this, and you read that report, I don't think you could come away with too many illusions about who Russell Brand is and the credibility of these allegations. I have rarely seen a mainstream publication publish such a detailed account of stuff like this, probably since Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. They're the only two I can remember where it was so thorough while these people were alive. And why it has to be thorough is, especially in the UK, Russell Brand is from the UK as well, it's very easy to sue for defamation, right? And although this was the Murdoch press, you know they have a great team of lawyers, they would have ran it through those lawyers 100 times to ensure that Russell Brand couldn't easily sue them. Based on all the evidence, and judging from the libel laws in the UK, and judging from that to someone like Russell Brand, if you're innocent, clearing your name on this stuff is insanely important just to your career, you'd think he would challenge it in court. He's now saying he's happy he's going to have his day in court, but you'd think if any of this was completely untrue, he would have challenged it in court after the Times came out with this massive investigation. But obviously, as it's been proved now, there is definitely enough evidence where he's been formally charged by the Met Police for a variety of crimes, right? So in my opinion, he didn't want to fight it for obvious reasons. So now all of this comes out, and you can go read the full report. But yeah, he's been formally charged, and it says here, he's been told to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 2nd of May, but he's believed to be in the US, which I'm pretty sure he is. In these situations, where a suspect may be overseas, prosecutors seek to agree the defendant's return. If there is no cooperation from a suspect, authorities then consider seeking extradition. So now we get to the heart of the grift. Russell Brand has firmly put himself in bed with the Trump administration. You've seen him pal around with like Donald Trump Jr., he's friends with RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz. He's right in there. And these are all people, by the way, RFK Jr., Donald Trump, and a whole host of others that he's friends with, that have similar allegations against him. So it's not like they're going to be personally repulsed by what he's been charged with and then pressure Donald Trump to extradite him. If Russell Brand doesn't want to leave the US for this trial, it's unlikely that's going to happen. Now, at the same time, he does have family here. I believe his wife is English. His wife's sister is a famous news presenter here as well. So maybe all of that together means that you'd expect him to actually return to court. But if his lawyers say there's a high chance that you actually might go to prison, do you think he's going to come to the UK for his trial? Especially now he can justify it to his audience by saying the UK government is essentially going to be prosecuting me for my freedom of speech and they're trying to stitch me up. I'm very curious to see if he'll actually go back, or if he'll go back and then come back to the US before the verdict is given so he can stay out of jail if that's the way it goes. So obviously this guy has absolutely no shame, but in terms of the conservative grift, it might have been successful for him because he is now in bed with some of the most powerful people. I think Rumble personally paid him to start putting his shows on Rumble, and the Rumble CEO is in bed with the Trump administration and the Trumps as well, including Donald Trump Jr. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of people have his back. And let's remember, Andrew Tate's lawyer works for Donald Trump in the White House. And that's how he got to visit the US recently. So it's not like something that hasn't happened in recent history. This could definitely happen. But basically, Russell Brand took to Twitter to try and cast more doubt on everything he's been charged with. So listen to this.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support. We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against people, institutions, and sometimes entire nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. How do you feel about your legal system right now? How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the government of Keir Starmer? Now, that's just sort of general context. Me, I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, we're just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing support. I want to let you know that our show will be on Rumble on Monday. Thanks for your support there. And of course, I'm now going to have the opportunity to defend these charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In the meantime, you lot, stay free.
But he's framing it all in this Christian way. He's saying this is all before I found the light of the Lord. Also, sickeningly, thrown in the Southport killings in there as well. Like, why? Because he knows that's inflammatory and he knows the far right absolutely love that shit and eat that shit up. So that's why he's sticking that in for no reason. And also, the thought that Keir Starmer and his government are directing the police and the legal system to go after Russell Brand is so funny. Like, that is just not the way Keir Starmer works, and that's not really the way the UK system works either. But like he said thank you for all the support I'm getting. Now, I'll show you the most prominent one. So Charlie Kirk, again, someone else who is deeply in bed with the Trump White House, he writes this on Twitter, and he says, every single allegation against Russell concerns events that took place 20 years ago. None of them existed while he was a famous actor or comedian. All of them emerged once he became a highly visible dissident on politics and COVID. Brand has been forthright about his behaviour as a young man, but the idea he was a serial rapist is absurd and, more importantly, unprovable. This is political prosecution, plain and simple. Absolutely gross, but conservatives going to defend someone like Russell Brand when they already promote Andrew Tate and defend Donald Trump as their messiah. Is that surprising in the slightest? Of course it's not. But again, with conservatives, there is nothing they won't defend you from. Like, if you are in the club with them, they will defend you no matter what. Now, I'll put some on screen, but I went on his YouTube upload, like his most recent one, before they started moderating the comments, and loads of them were supporting him. Now, if you go on it, like, all the comments are just support, it's pretty clear someone's going through them and deleting all the ones that are criticising him and everything. But I feel like that is just, a combination of these things. Conservatism in America and this born-again Christianity. So with the conservatism, we're seeing that they don't give a shit about any of this stuff. Like, they don't give a shit about women. They don't give a shit about assault. They don't give a shit even if you're found guilty. they will still promote you and protect you as long as you fall in line with the Trump administration. And I've made videos about this recently. There's seemingly no consequences for anything these days. Stuff that used to get you ostracized from society, there is nothing you can do, really, unless you're thrown into prison. And even then, you're still often called innocent and being prosecuted by the state, as these two are framing it, as Russell is now being prosecuted because he's political, because this madman is such a threat to anything. Really? But it also shows you the most toxic blend of Christianity that often goes in with American conservatism. So I've said in videos on this channel, I was raised Catholic in like a migrant Catholic community, and a lot of this American evangelical style Christianity is just really alien to me, like born again Christianity or anything like that, where being told that you are forgiven for all your sins just because like you said sorry. I never got the sense when I was a kid being raised in this that simply doing bad things and then saying sorry to God makes things okay. But sadly, there are loads of Christians who think this. Like, there are loads of Christians who think the worst people in history, if they just repented on their deathbed, they would go to heaven as well. And that is what these people are saying with Russell Brand. Well, 20 years ago, he was a different man. He was a drug addict. He was a sex addict. And he hadn't found the light of God. Now he's found the light of God. He's just such a different person. And we cannot judge his actions of a 28 or 9-year-old Russell Brand to the 55-year-old Russell Brand, because God has made such a difference, and God forgives. And God forgives. And that's why, like, I feel like it's an American thing, because it's so centered on the individual, like, soul or whatever, while not even focusing on the terrible stuff he did to people. So what about the people he did stuff to? What happens to them? What does God think about them? They just deserved it? Because he's going to forgive this guy anyway? You can see how this type of Christianity is just totally misogynistic and upholds patriarchy, but it's also like the perfect place for someone like Russell Brand to go, because he knows that they'll forgive him for anything. You can just say, I did that when I was younger, and if we only judge me by when I was baptized like 2 years ago, then I'm actually a saint because I haven't done anything wrong. Well, I mean, to a lot of us he has, because he pushes like insane fascist propaganda, but that's how a lot of these people see it. And you just see so many people saying this on social media, that now he's a Christian, it's all okay. But yeah, increasingly depressing that strategically for Russell Brand, he has essentially protected himself by just becoming a right-wing Christian grifter. And he might actually be protected by a government. Like, he might actually be protected by Donald Trump if they try and ask the US to send him to the UK for his trial and stuff. And it just shows increasingly with the fascist takeover of certain places in the Western world, there are no consequences for anything you fucking do. As if there were any consequences for men doing this type of thing anyway before. Seems like now there are no consequences. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.